On this day in history, we remember the remarkable individuals who shaped our world. Welcome to Who Died Today in History, where we honor their legacies. From artists to leaders, their impact lives on. If you find their stories meaningful, like, subscribe, and hit the bell to stay connected.
Thank you to all our amazing channel members for your generous support.
Claudia Cardinale, one of the last great icons of European cinema's golden age, passed away yesterday at the age of 86. Her death was natural, the quiet conclusion to a long life that had been lived in the public eye. Cardinale's departure signaled not only the loss of a beloved actress, but also the fading of a generation of stars who defined the elegance, complexity, and glamour of mid-20th century film. Born in Tunis in 1938 to Sicilian parents, Cardinale rose to prominence during the 1960s with unforgettable performances in 8½, The Leopard, and Once Upon a Time in the West. She represented the sophisticated yet conflicted femininity of her time, embodying strength, sensuality, and resilience at a moment when cinema was grappling with cultural shifts around gender, politics, and identity. Her passing in 2025 resonated deeply in an era increasingly aware of preserving artistic legacies. Unlike the fleeting celebrity culture of the digital age, Cardinale's career reminded audiences of a time when stardom was built on artistry, mystique, and endurance. The immediate reaction to her death was an outpouring of tributes from filmmakers, actors, and cultural institutions around the world. Italy, in particular, mourned her as both a national treasure and a symbol of its post-war artistic renaissance. Film archives and festivals quickly organized retrospectives, ensuring that younger generations would rediscover her work. This swift cultural response underscored her enduring influence and affirmed that her legend had only grown larger in death. Cardinale's passing shifted attention to the broader question of how we commemorate cinematic icons in an age of streaming and digital accessibility. While her contemporaries are remembered through film reels and photographs, Cardinale's legacy is uniquely amplified by modern technology that keeps her performances alive at the click of a button. Her death, therefore, highlighted the paradox of mortality in the arts. Though the artist vanishes, their presence remains immediate, even eternal on screen. Ultimately, Claudia Cardinale's life and death remind us of humanity's need to preserve beauty and meaning through memory. We immortalize such figures through retrospectives, biographies, and, most importantly, the enduring power of their work. Her death reveals not only the inevitability of time, but also the capacity of art to transcend it. Cardinale remains a luminous presence, her on-screen vitality a defiance of mortality itself. Tommy Bond, best remembered as one of the original child stars of Our Gang, also known as the Little Rascals, passed away on September 24, 2005, at the age of 79 from complications of heart disease. His death was natural, yet it marked the end of a direct link to one of Hollywood's most beloved and enduring legacies of early American cinema. Bond's passing reminded audiences of the fragile thread connecting modern entertainment with the golden age of child stardom in the 1930s and 1940s. Bond's career began when he joined Our Gang in 1931 as a young boy, quickly becoming known for his role as Butch, the tough-talking neighborhood bully. In an era defined by the Great Depression, these short films captured the innocence, resilience, and humor of children in working-class America. Bond's character reflected the playful toughness of the time, providing audiences with escapism while also grounding the series in relatable struggles. His later work included supporting roles in iconic productions, including Gone with the Wind and the Superman serials, further solidifying his place in Hollywood history. The immediate reaction to his death was one of nostalgia and reflection. Fans and film historians alike viewed Bond's passing as symbolic of the waning presence of first-hand witnesses to Hollywood's formative years. While other child stars of his era struggled with the darker consequences of early fame, Bond managed to transition into a stable career outside acting, working in television production. His ability to navigate life after child stardom became part of the narrative surrounding his death, offering a rare example of balance in a system often criticized for exploiting young talent. In death, Bond's legacy was amplified by retrospectives of Our Gang and its cultural significance. His role as Butch may have been fictional, but it resonated with audiences across generations, embodying both the mischief and resilience of youth. His departure encouraged a renewed interest in preserving early cinema, not just as entertainment, but as historical testimony to American values during times of hardship. Bond's passing underscores humanity's relationship with memory and mortality. While he left the screen decades before his death, his image remains eternally young, preserved in black and white reels that continue to charm new audiences. Through film preservation, documentaries, and fan tributes, Tommy Bond lives on as both an actor and a cultural symbol, immortalized in the laughter and nostalgia of generations who continue to cherish the stories of childhood he helped bring to life. Pharoah Sanders, the visionary jazz saxophonist often hailed as one of the most spiritual voices of his generation, passed away on September 24, 2022, at the age of 81. His death was natural, the quiet, close to a life marked not by scandal or violence, but by a lifelong pursuit of transcendent sound. This peaceful ending stood in contrast to the turbulent and revolutionary eras he lived through, especially the 1960s and 1970s, when his music embodied both the unrest and the yearning for higher meaning that defined his time. Sanders rose to prominence through his collaborations with John Coltrane, but his own work, especially albums like Karma, pushed the boundaries of jazz into realms of mysticism, spirituality, and raw emotion. When he died, the immediate consequence for the jazz world was a profound sense of loss. He was not just a musician, but a keeper of a tradition that blended African roots, free jazz experimentation, and a search for universal truth. His passing reminded many of the fragility of living links to the avant-garde jazz movement, a movement that, through artists like Sanders, sought to connect sound with spirit, politics with prayer. His death amplified his legend in subtle but powerful ways. In life, Sanders was sometimes misunderstood or overshadowed by Coltrane's towering legacy. In death, however, his influence has been reappraised, with new generations of musicians and listeners recognizing the depth of his contributions. Collaborations late in life, such as his 2021 album Promises with Floating Points and the London Symphony Orchestra, ensured that his voice remained relevant and vital even at the edge of his final years. His passing cemented him as a bridge between eras, between the fiery experimentation of the past and the boundary-crossing creativity of the present. What Sanders' death reveals is how humanity often turns to art to grapple with mortality. His music was steeped in themes of eternity, spirit, and transcendence, and it is through this very art that he is immortalized. Listeners may not remember the details of his biography, but they will remember the way his saxophone cried, chanted, and soared. Through recordings, tributes, and the continued evolution of jazz inspired by his vision, Sanders lives on as a reminder that while mortality claims the body, memory and creativity preserve the soul. In the echo of every note he left behind, one hears both the finality of death and the promise of eternity. Theodore Seuss Geisel, better known to the world as Dr. Seuss, died on September 24, 1991, at the age of 87. His death was natural, caused by oral cancer, and it marked the end of a career that had profoundly shaped children's literature in the 20th century. The peaceful nature of his passing reflected his lifelong identity as a cultural figure who avoided political violence or scandal, and instead used whimsical storytelling to navigate the moral and social challenges of his era. Dr. Seuss lived through the Great Depression, World War II, and the social revolutions of the mid-20th century. His works, while playful on the surface, often engaged directly with the values and anxieties of these times. Books like The Lorax reflected growing environmental concerns, while the Sneetches tackled prejudice and social hierarchies. His death, therefore, was not just the loss of a beloved children's author, but the silencing of a voice that had served as both entertainer and moral commentator for generations. The immediate consequence of his passing was an outpouring of public grief and remembrance. For millions of children and adults, Seuss's words had been a first introduction to reading, imagination, and the lessons of kindness, fairness, and resilience. His absence created a cultural void, but it also prompted a wave of reissues, adaptations, and commemorations that ensured his legacy would continue. Far from diminishing his presence, his death amplified it, cementing him as a timeless figure in children's literature. Over the years, Dr. Seuss's works have only grown in stature. Annual celebrations like Read Across America Day, which coincides with his birthday, demonstrate how his legacy has shifted from mere authorship to a symbol of literacy and learning. Even debates about his work in recent years, as some of his lesser-known books were scrutinized for outdated racial imagery, have underscored his enduring cultural significance. His death did not end his influence. Instead, it sparked renewed dialogue about how art evolves with society's values. Dr. Seuss's passing reveals humanity's need to preserve those who shaped our imagination. We immortalize him through art, education, and commemoration, because his stories transcended entertainment to become vessels of memory and morality. In this way, mortality does not silence such figures. It transforms them into guiding voices that echo across generations. Zeki Müren, often called the Son of Art in Turkey, died on September 24, 1996, at the age of 64. His death was sudden and dramatic. He collapsed on stage in Izmir while being honored during a televised event, a setting that symbolized his lifelong devotion to music and performance. The cause was a heart attack, though he had long suffered from health issues related to diabetes and cardiovascular disease. That he passed away in the spotlight, literally performing until his final breath, seemed to capture the essence of his public life, where art and identity were inseparable. Müren lived through and reflected a changing Turkey. Rising to fame in the 1950s, he bridged Ottoman classical traditions with modern popular music, embodying both continuity and innovation. His flamboyant stage costumes, gender-defying style, and graceful public demeanor challenged rigid norms of masculinity in a conservative society. In this sense, his death highlighted the tensions of his era, a society negotiating between tradition and modernity, between private conservatism and public experimentation. The immediate aftermath of his death was profound national mourning. Fans across generations, many of whom had grown up with his songs, flooded the streets to honor him. State leaders paid tribute, acknowledging his role not only as an entertainer, but as a cultural ambassador. His passing amplified his legend, freezing him in memory as the eternal voice of Turkish art music. Just as Edith Piaf's death in France symbolized the end of an era of chanson, so too did Müren's death in Turkey mark the fading of a golden age of musical romanticism. His legacy, however, only deepened after his passing. Zeki Müren is remembered through annual concerts, tributes, and academic studies of his work. Museums and cultural centers preserve his costumes, letters, and recordings, ensuring that he remains a visible figure in Turkish cultural history. His songs, still widely played, keep his voice alive, reminding listeners of both his artistry and his courage in self-expression. Müren's death illustrates how mortality can transform artists into eternal symbols. We immortalize such figures not only because of their talent, but because their lives embody struggles and aspirations larger than themselves. Through music, performance, and commemoration, Zeki Müren became more than a singer. He became a mirror of Turkey's evolving identity, forever echoing the power of art to transcend death. Zita Johann, remembered most vividly as the heroine of the 1932 film The Mummy alongside Boris Karloff, passed away on September 24, 1993 at the age of 89. Her death was natural, the result of complications from pneumonia, and came at a time when Hollywood's golden age stars were increasingly being rediscovered by new generations of film enthusiasts. Unlike the dramatic or tragic deaths that often define the legends of screen icons, Johann's quiet passing reflected a life lived largely outside the relentless glare of fame. Born in Austria-Hungary and immigrating to the United States, Johann began her career on Broadway before transitioning to Hollywood in the early 1930s. Her film career, though brief, was deeply impactful. With her dark, haunting beauty and commanding presence, she was perfectly cast in The Mummy, a film that embodied early Hollywood's fascination with mysticism, exoticism, and the supernatural. Yet Johann resisted the industry's superficiality, clashing with directors and producers over artistic integrity. After only a handful of films, she retreated from Hollywood, choosing instead to dedicate herself to stage work and teaching. Her death marked the end of a direct connection to one of cinema's earliest and most enduring horror legacies. At the time, Universal's classic monster films were already firmly entrenched in popular culture, and Johann's role as Helen Grosvenor/Princess Ankh-es-en Amon had become iconic. The immediate consequence of her passing was not public hysteria, but rather a quieter recognition from film historians and genre enthusiasts, who saw her as a link to an era when cinema was still experimenting with form, atmosphere, and archetypal storytelling. Johann's death amplified her legend in a subtle way. Having lived much of her later life outside of celebrity culture, she came to represent the timelessness of classic cinema itself, her image frozen forever in the stark black and white frames of The Mummy. Unlike stars whose lives were defined by scandal or spectacle, Johann's legacy grew from the endurance of her art rather than the drama of her personal life. Her passing underscores humanity's enduring relationship with memory and immortality. Through film, Johann remains ageless, her face a symbol of early Hollywood's dreamlike power. We immortalize such figures by preserving their work, revisiting their performances, and situating them within the larger cultural narratives of their time. In doing so, we honor not only the artist but the shared history their art represents, an enduring reminder that mortality may claim the body, but memory, art, and story extend life far beyond its natural limits. Lyle Bettger, an American actor best remembered for his sharply etched portrayals of villains in mid-20th century film and television, died of natural causes on September 24, 2003, at the age of 88. His passing came quietly in his Pennsylvania home, far from the bright lights of Hollywood where he had once commanded attention with his striking looks and menacing charisma. Unlike the tragic or sensational deaths that often mark Hollywood lore, Bettger's end reflected a generation of actors whose fame burned brightly in the golden and silver ages of entertainment, but gradually dimmed with the industry's constant reinvention. Bettger's career thrived in the 1950s and 1960s, when audiences craved strong moral dichotomies on screen. He specialized in antagonists, smooth, cold, and dangerous men who reflected the anxieties of post-war America. His roles in films such as The Greatest Show on Earth and westerns like Gunfight at the OK Corral aligned with an era that valued stark storytelling of good versus evil, a mirror of the geopolitical tensions of the Cold War. His transition into television, with appearances on popular series like Perry Mason and Wagon Train, showcased how mid-century actors navigated the rapidly shifting landscape of mass entertainment. The immediate consequences of Bettger's death were not widely publicized. Unlike iconic stars whose passing generated public mourning, his was marked more by quiet recognition among film historians and genre fans. Yet, his departure invited reflection on the kind of artistry that supports the backbone of cinema, the character actor. Bettger's villains, though secondary to heroes, gave narrative weight to stories, embodying the darkness that made virtue shine brighter. His death underscored the passing of a generation of performers who, while not household names in later years, shaped the storytelling conventions that Hollywood still employs. Bettger's legacy, like many of his contemporaries, is preserved in the enduring presence of his films. His characters live on in restored classics and television reruns, ensuring that his contributions remain accessible. His life and death remind us that cultural immortality often resides not just in leading stars, but also in the supporting players who enrich stories with depth and complexity. Sarah Churchill, daughter of Britain's wartime Prime Minister Winston Churchill, lived a life shaped by both privilege and struggle. Born in 1914, she pursued a career as an actress and dancer, gaining attention for her performances on stage and in film. Yet her personal life was often marked by turbulence, including failed marriages and a widely reported battle with alcoholism. On September 24, 1982, she died of natural causes at the age of 67 in London, bringing to a close a life that reflected both the opportunities and pressures of being tied to one of the 20th century's most powerful families. Her death, though not sudden or violent, symbolized the fading of an era. As the daughter of Winston Churchill, Sarah carried the weight of her father's towering legacy. While she found modest success as an entertainer, she struggled to define her own identity outside of his shadow. This tension echoed a broader theme of mid-20th century Britain, where the nation itself was wrestling with diminished imperial power and a need to redefine its place in the modern world. Sarah's personal challenges mirrored this cultural search for stability amid shifting identities. The immediate consequences of her passing were relatively quiet compared to the global reaction to her father's death in 1965. Obituaries noted her artistic career and her wartime service as a member of the Women's Auxiliary Air Force, where she had contributed to Britain's defense. Her role during the war, though overshadowed by her father's statesmanship, was a reminder that the Churchill family's influence extended beyond politics and into cultural and social life. In death, Sarah Churchill became a figure who embodied both the glamour and the struggles of her generation. Her passing highlighted the fragility of personal identity when bound to national history, and it underscored how fame by association can complicate a legacy. Unlike her father, her memory did not immediately enter the pantheon of public commemoration, yet her story remains a valuable part of the Churchill family narrative. Reflecting on Sarah's life and death reminds us of humanity's enduring fascination with mortality and legacy. We immortalize such figures not only in statues or biographies, but also in the nuanced stories of their struggles. Sarah Churchill is remembered through film archives, theater records, and accounts of her personal journey, ensuring that even those who live in the shadow of greatness leave behind their own imprint on history.